Okay, people, we are live now on YouTube. Waiting for Tron Black. Hello, Tron.
Hello.
And we are and we are live now. This is the real Bitcoin Bitcoin coder. Tron, at first I want to thank you for being with us tonight, and you're the right person for some questions, as last 6 days all of these guys did the work. Among other social activities, they had lessons from blockchain, and of course we were using RavenCoin testnet for showing them about the transaction. Even we introduced them with a unique asset, and today we did even C# coding of online wallet. So
great.
Okay,
great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tron. So let me start with the questions.
Sure.
You, as the coder who did commits on Bitcoin blockchain at early stage, why you choose to be involved in some altcoin project? RavenCoin is like Bitcoin version 2.0. I see this kind of explanation from time to time on internet.
Yeah.
So please tell me how this all started.
Sure. So I work for Medici Ventures. It's a division of Overstock. It's a big online retailer here in the U.S. And they do venture capital for a whole bunch of companies. And so I'm a principal developer for them. So I help with a bunch of companies. And Patrick Byrne is friends with Bruce Fenton. He was the former executive director of the Bitcoin Foundation. And so they wanted to, Bruce wanted to create a coin. So he came up with this idea in this paper on October 31st. So it was kind of just RavenCoin's birthday, kind of for its paper or its idea. And he had some other people trying to develop it, and they weren't quite cutting it. And Patrick said, "Hey, I have some developers," and he talked to me. And so that's how I got involved. So it was actually someone else's idea, and I was just in the right place at the right time to help make it happen.
Well, not just, but okay. Let's see. Thanks for being modest. Okay, so RavenCoin project is being hyped last couple of weeks because of Binance, of course, listing.
Right.
Not because people realized its potential on our sorrow, of course.
Yep.
So do you feel like it's too much talk for RavenCoin from the people who are not from coding space, but ordinary people, traders, hypers?
Sure. So go ahead.
Are you afraid that this kind of new community, can make a RavenCoin hype coin, not community?
So here's my thoughts on that. So the economic model and the idea that coins and value can go up really helps us. We don't have a marketing department. We have a great community, but we don't have a marketing department. We're not an ICO that raised a bunch of money, that pays a bunch of marketing and graphic artists and signs and all that kind of stuff. And I'm actually at a conference now in Vegas, and there are lots of ICOs here and things like that. And they've got like Lambos parked in the hotel, lobby, and their name plastered on it. We just don't have that. So the only thing we do have is kind of this idea that eventually someone will recognize the value that's there, and hopefully run the price up because they recognize the value. The price may go up too high. That happens all the time. Runs up too high, and then it comes back down. But if you watch Bitcoin, did the same thing, right? It runs up, it runs up to $1, and everybody says, $1, it's way too high, and they sell it and drops back down 30 cents and up to $30 and then back down. And it kind of does these repeated cycles as people recognize the value of what's happening. And so I'm hoping that the same thing happens, right? We'll get these run-ups. The nice part about the Binance thing was because we were on Binance, it got attention of a bunch of people. And that made the price go up. And so then once we hit page 1 of CoinMarketCap, All of a sudden, we hit that page in a bear market. It was a bunch of negative things, and we hit there at like plus 40%. We went plus, up to 70%. Kind of ran the table up to where it is now. We have lots more attention now, and I just hope it'll settle at its true value, whatever that is, right? And we're not going to hype it. We'll talk about it from a technical perspective. We're not going to hype it. There's enough community people hyping it, and we're not against them at all. If someone wants to hype it, that's fine. They'll just mix in with all the other hype from all the other ICOs, but eventually it should find its true value. So.
Yeah, because maybe 1 month ago, whenever I speak about RavenCoin, everyone asked me, "Come on, where did you find this kind of project? I never heard of it." It was so incognito, just because you, Bruce, Patrick, and others, which were engaged at the start, release were pretty much not interested in doing any hype. So.
And that's still true, right? So we're going to let other people recognize the value when they do. So yeah.
Well, I think the folks realize the potential of RavenCoin, as it's much easier to use than Ethereum or other platforms to make own token, and the price is so much cheaper than those other solutions, at least at the moment.
For now.
Okay, so. The real value of RavenCoin, for example, the IBM blockchain department, the real value of RavenCoin and mean about the real value in real life of any blockchain project. For example, the IBM blockchain department CEO, I'm not sure what was the name, claimed that food tracking and digital personal IDs are the blockchain's most adaptable projects in the future. What's your opinion? Which kind of project is missing?
So we're involved in a lot of those projects, especially early on at Medici. Some of them I don't think are good uses. The good uses end up being ones where people don't necessarily trust each other. Which means you kind of need to have this kind of like distributed network. I think there's a lot of projects where it's like, might be better to do it with a database. If it's more efficient and the parties aren't, if the parties are all aligned, like let's say you were doing food tracking and all the people doing food tracking are all kind of on the same page. You could have a food tracking company that just sticks that stuff in a database and tracks food. It might not be the best use for a blockchain. I think there may be some uses, some tracking and provenance tracking and things like that that'll work out. But I would say half or more of the projects that are out there kind of using the blockchain and kind of shoving it in as a use case, I don't think they'll stick around. It's just it's a very inefficient database, right? And if everybody trusts the database or the company that's running the database, that they're not gonna, even if they're a third party and they don't really care whether the food tracks properly, they're just a third party. That's their only job, is to track this food tracking. Then you can pretty much trust them. That's their job, and they can do it in a database. And they can do it far more efficiently. There may be other use cases where, maybe between countries that don't trust each other or something like that, where it's better to have a distributed network. But some of these projects will just fail because it's an inefficient database.
I understand. It's so easy to do overkill with blockchain.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So now, for example, we had several ideas from the crowd behind me, and some of ideas were like social activists voting engine. Means people organized to stop government to do some stupid things in some local community. So need make tokenized voting liability for them.
Sure.
So what would you recommend? Either using ERC20 token,
ERC20?
or maybe sorry, I wrong this, but or unique token, which will, you need to send them back the vote.
Sure. Both are good. We're actually so Medici Ventures is invested in 2 voting companies, Votes and Votum. So we think that's a pretty good use case. One thing you have to be careful, at least in political voting, you need to be able to make sure that you want to be able to make sure that you can check that your vote was recorded correctly, but that you can't prove that to someone else. and for the reasons that you don't want someone coming in from the outside and saying, I want you to vote this way or else kind of thing. And then, so like you don't want a receipt for your vote. And that's why they, at least in the US here, they'll do it in a voting polling, station, so that you go in there, nobody can follow you in, nobody can check that you vote. You kind of confirm that you voted correctly, but then, you could walk out and tell somebody you voted for somebody else if you want. You can't prove that you voted for somebody.
Yes, this was the first question from Igor, who is 30 years with social innovation, and he's asking me, why should we allow people who are stealing votes, steal them even more easy if you allow voting from home or some place like that?
Yeah. So one thing that blockchain could solve is if you're able to issue the private key to an individual, they can vote, but they can't counterfeit a vote. They can't create another vote because there's kind of the one key that's been associated with them. It would be nice. I mean, U.S. doesn't really have, tries not to do an ID, like a federal ID. It's we're kind of broken up into states. If you can associate your vote with an ID, you really don't want it associated, but you do want the ability to vote, to say this gives me the right to vote, but not necessarily connect your vote to it. So those are some of the tricks. There's some technologies out there if you haven't looked at them. ZK snarks, things like that, ring signatures and things like that, where you can kind of prove that something is transferred like a vote, but you can't connect the dots, right? You can't connect it back to the origin. And so those types of things would be valuable, I think, for voting. As far as like if you wanted to do something where the government wants to stop voting and you still want to vote, then blockchain is really good for that. It's really good for making it so, well, we can't really stop it because you'd have to stop, 100,000 nodes that are running around the entire Earth. It's one of the reasons Bitcoin was created, was kind of this ability to say we want to have a cash money thing, and the systems that were created in the 90s, which worked just fine, but they required somebody to be there to say, is this a double spend? And that central point of control just got shut down and the money system failed. So this solved that problem. The blockchain solved that problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you still did not tell me if unique vote so
I think ERC20 works fine. The voting that'll be in RavenCoin will allow a group that holds a token to vote among that group. I don't think it would be good for necessarily to try to replace the U.S. voting system with RavenCoin. I think either one works. ERC20 has, you can program stuff, right? You can write Solidity code that tracks votes and puts them in buckets. There's also the idea of liquid democracy, which is, okay, I have the right to vote, but I don't have enough knowledge or ability to research all of these things that I'm voting on. But I do know this one guy who researches it all the time. I can send my vote to him. He's done all the research. I trust him, and so he can then take my vote and count it against somebody. And I think that's a good system.
For sure, definitely, but it's impossible to implement, of course. It's impossible to make such law, not to implement in blockchain.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So also there, our government, the government of Montenegro, pronounced that next year they will start project of making universal ID, which means medical ID, driver's license ID, and personal ID will be in one document.
Yep.
Possible to how hard it would be to make this kind of documents involved in some blockchain solution, RavenCoin solution, some other solution, some semi-centralized. Let me check how I write down. Yeah, full half decentralized blockchain project. Is it possible to make especially for the government, or this simply can be used on RavenCoin blockchain? On what would be your advice about this?
Okay, so I don't like putting people's personal information on a blockchain. There's all kinds of ones. Even people think blockchain, oh, great new technology. Oh, healthcare, massive, massive, spending money, and they try to smash those together and put medical records on the blockchain. Not a good fit. It just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to put a ton of data on a blockchain where everybody has to store it. Doesn't make sense to, and then they say, well, we'll just encrypt it. Well, Bitcoin, there's no encryption in Bitcoin. There's signing, but nothing's encrypted, right? It's all public. You can read it all. So I don't like the idea of putting data. You can encrypt data and obviously put it in a blockchain because it's just a big data store. But then it's basically the keys to the data. If those keys get out, this data is now permanently recorded, and this key permanently looks at this data. So not a great place to store records. Now, with that being said, if you have an ID that kind of ties to everybody, that gives you the ability to either take that, and you could also put like a public key or something like that, that's part of the ID, that allows you to say, okay, I hold the private key for my public ID. So that gives you some power to say, if I sign something, it's me that's signing it. And once you do that, you have this ability to do a bunch of things. You can have a reputation score and things like that. It's like, okay, I've signed something and I've promised this or created this agreement, and people have interacted with me. They can start giving me a reputation, like an eBay ratings or something like that. Until you have an ID, or at least kind of lock it down, you have the danger of sock puppeting, right? I create 100 IDs, I gain some trust, and then I throw it away by basically scamming somebody or whatever. So there's some advantages. As a freedom guy, I'm not a big fan of like government IDs, but if you're going to have them, there's some advantages to being able to also have a private key that says anything I sign is, here's my ID, it's me, right? So the public key and a private key that I hold secret. And you can do all kinds of stuff on the blockchain with that.
But I was thinking more about, the ID with the personal picture and just QR code. So, for example, if you need to prove how old are you, so you can enter some manifestation.
Yes.
There is no need the security guy to know your name, surname, see your address, and other stuff. I was more thinking about this.
Fair enough. So I like the idea of self-sovereign ID. So this is where I present my ID to someone, either separately, not on a blockchain, separately, independently, and somebody says, well, wait a minute, could you have copied that? You can take the hash of that and have someone else attest to it. In the US, that would be Department of Homeland Security, our driver's license division, probably some government entity in your country, basically attest to the accuracy of your ID. Also, if you want to produce less, you can just say, look, I'm just going to produce something that says I'm over 21. You don't know my birthday, but somebody's going to attest with their private key, sign something in their signature that says, yes, you're over 21. That way you're not giving away information, your picture, your address, your where you live, and all of that kind of stuff. It's just enough to, in the US, get into a place you can drink, or into somewhere or whatever that requires an age limit. So I like that idea where I'm in control of my ID, but because they don't necessarily trust me, because I can just create it, right? Create a physical one, create a digital one. But if I have somebody else that's signing that they trust, meaning this other entity trusts the government, then you just say, oh, here's the signature that proves I'm 21. I like those ideas. And there's about 4 or 5 projects with that, Evernym, Uport, just a bunch of projects that are kind of going down a standards track for that idea. Yeah.
Understand. Okay, so another thing. Yes, of course. I did read about some rumors about RavenCoin integration with RSK.
So we have that was one of Bruce Fenton's original plans, was to do RSK on, which is essentially the virtual machine and everything from Ethereum. It's Ethereum's virtual machine system integrated into a UTXO coin, like into Bitcoin. And there is a project, RSK, that goes into Bitcoin. That was Bruce Fenton's original idea for adding assets. When I came into the project, I had done it multiple other ways in counterparty, open assets, colored coin type model. I thought that was a better model, so we kind of switched to that. But we haven't written anything that would prevent RSK from working with RavenCoin. It's really a clone of Bitcoin. So if they get it working on Bitcoin, we may need to backport a couple of changes or whatever, but that were made between October and now, last October and now. But there's no reason RSK couldn't run on top of RavenCoin as well, but it would be kind of separate, right? And independent of the asset layer that we have now.
I understand. And about if I suppose that you will release, not mean exactly you, someone from the community is about to release the APIs for assets for different programming languages, right? Or it's already done?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes. So there's a couple of different things going on there. We actually have a company that came to us that wants to use RavenCoin for doing assets, and they sell to wealthy people here in the actually they create companies in like Bermuda and things like that, and then sell it to wealthy people in the U.S. and Dubai and whatnot. So they want these second tier layers, so APIs to be able to create assets, from a web browser or from just API, REST API type things, and they're helping with that. And then we're also building some additional ones. So if you're familiar with Insight, Insight was written by BitPay and connects up, basically wraps Bitcoin D. We're doing the same thing, wrap Raven D, and then it adds a whole bunch of not only an explorer but an API layer for just querying things like how many assets. You can even take your signed transaction and submit it through an API and things like that. So those second tier things that are being built on top of RavenCoin, those are in progress right now.
I understand. So can you tell us more about, I cannot say delay, but about assets layer not being activated yet?
Yeah.
Who is this mysterious pool?
I don't know. So this is a surprise. This is what I'm a little tired because it kind of kept me up last night. So I came down. I'm at a conference in Las Vegas, and I came down, and there's miners here. Like there's a whole huge conference room full of mining people. They have Lambos parked around. They're trying to sell their mining gear and everything, and they like, have you heard what's going on? I said no. They said, well, your asset layer is activates at 90%. I said no that, and he said, well, there's 20% that appears to be stopping it and intentionally. Like that, it's not that they just didn't hear about it. It's that they said, all right, they downgraded the software and they have 20% of the mining power, like a terahash or something of mining power. And I didn't know that. And so I've been following it ever since. Right now, because I'm in this mining conference, I'm able to talk to the organizer of this mining conference. And so she's making calls to mining. There's other discords that are mining discords that aren't related to RavenCoin. They're like, hey, we need to help out RavenCoin. And so we hit 10 terahashes or something the other day trying to overcome this 20% because we got to like almost double the hash power to overcome this. We're close right now. I don't know if you're watching it. There's a couple of explorers that show this. One from MinerMore and also our Raven Stats one that are kind of showing we're at 87% or something, and we have to hit 89.98. It's so close.
I'm sure it will come out with yes on the end, but it's really funny. It's
yeah.
No one did expect this. I suppose.
I didn't expect it. I expected pretty much, 100% adoption. There might be a few stragglers, but only because we can't talk to them. They just didn't hear about it. Did not expect this. Don't understand their motivations. So there's all these speculation that they want to load up on RavenCoin before assets. There's speculation they're malicious. Speculation, there's just all these things, but we're just guessing. We don't know. Yeah. It's kind of fun.
Maybe I need to ask the folks if someone would have some question for you. So maybe we leave you alone. Sure. Because I'm sure that you
are for questions.
So any question? I think here people are very much tired because it's long day here, and they're more like listen mode. Yeah.
I love the RavenCoin shirt over here, gentleman in the red and the RavenCoin shirt. I love that.
Yeah, this is our t-shirt.
I like it.
We need to send you one sample, and one lady wants to ask you something.
Yeah.
Okay. How is possible for RavenCoin to go ups and down?
In price?
RavenCoin, yes.
In price. Yes. How is it possible? So the price is just set by the market. So it's just buyers and sellers, supply and demand. We don't control it at all. It's quite literally probably now tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people buying and selling, and just wherever that price meets, that's where the price settles. So it's just a free open market price discovery mechanism. So Binance, Bittrex, and the price will never separate much on the exchanges because bots will take that, will arbitrage that out. So if it gets cheaper on Bittrex, for example, bots or programs will buy it on Bittrex and kind of drive the price up, and sell it on Binance and drive the price down until those two meet. It's, if it gets too hyped, it'll, the price runs up, and then people think, oh, it's too high, I think I better sell, and we'll drive it back down. We don't control it at all. We just the price is what the price is, what people think it's worth, and it's like lots of people deciding what it's worth collectively, and wherever those two meet. So that answer the question?
I think you are free to have some rest or to do some other job now.
Okay. All right. It was nice seeing all of you, and thanks for your interest in RavenCoin. Yeah.
Also, I'd like to know what are your thoughts on Ethereum and its moving to the proof of stake algorithm?
Yeah.
Do you think
so
it's going to work out, and do you think that it's technically sound?
I think it's technically sound. Some of the people I went to dinner with last night would disagree. So the guy I went to dinner with last night thinks that the security of the coin is the sum total of the electricity spent over the life of the coin. And so we had a little bit of a disagreement there. I think proof of stake is sound. I think it has its drawback is that you can't distribute with it, right? It's not, we couldn't have bootstrapped RavenCoin with proof of stake, because we would have had to keep some or give some to somebody, or give it out, based on our whims. Whereas, if you mine, it's like people have to spend the funds to get it, and it's a lot more fair distribution method. Once you're distributed pretty well, meaning widely distributed, I think proof of stake is okay. There's a concept of nothing at stake. I don't know if any of you are familiar with nothing at stake.
Well, nothing at stake. Okay.
So one of the dangers of proof of stake is, staking is basically taking your coins and putting them at risk, and so then you get chosen kind of at random based on kind of your pro rata amount that you've staked. And then you get the block reward. You get to verify the transactions. If you verify them badly, like you do something wrong, try to cheat, put your own, get your own coins or do something bad, then your stake is at risk. The system can take it from you. So that way it kind of protects the system, and you're putting something at risk. The problem is that as you're building these blocks, and let's say you're building the blocks and then you sell your coins, you sell all of your Ethereum, and you sell them and you turn them into Bitcoin. So now you're not even part of this network, but you keep your private keys. And then you go back a few blocks when you did own them, and then you start trying to do staking there and connect blocks above where you've already sold them. So you have nothing at stake at the point, meaning you've sold everything, so you have nothing at stake, but you're using private keys for keys that were good in the blocks above that did have your coins. And so this is the problem with proof of stake. It can be solved fairly easily by doing this max reorg depth. And so we actually added that into RavenCoin as an additional check, because we do have a concern that RavenCoin's worth 100 million, something like that, somewhere in that range. We do worry that somebody puts $1 billion asset on it. And so now the incentive to attack the coin is at $1 billion, where it's designed to protect the $1 million. The amount of hashing and reward is $1 million. So we put some mechanisms in there, some of the mechanisms from the proof of stake that says after 60 blocks, we won't accept a surprise chain. So somebody can't jump back 80 blocks, replace it, and try to swing in with this. Anyway, we put some of the proof of stake concepts into RavenCoin to kind of protect it against these potential attack vectors that Bitcoin doesn't have to worry about that, and Ethereum does, but they're can still do some of these attacks on Ethereum, but I just haven't seen them. Ethereum's had more problems with people writing bad Solidity code or something than they have with the actual network. Network's actually been pretty good. And I like Ethereum. I'm not against Ethereum. I think it's great for all these other contracts. I just think for ERC20 type things where you're just issuing an asset,
it's overkill now because of you.
Yep. Yep, that's the way I think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well,
Hey.
we will just thank you once again for giving us opportunity to meet such a big name in this area.
Thank you. It's been great seeing all of you, and happy to answer questions, and we can do this again. So.
Okay, Tron. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. All right.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.